Everybody, welcome to local church. Super glad that you're here. How's the 9 a.m. crowd feeling? Yeah, 9 a.m. You guys got the energy. My name is Michael. It's such an honor to be here with you as always. Today we are in part 2 of a 3-part series about money called If God Was Your Financial Advisor. Tagline, 3 game-changing money tips straight from God. This is a series where we together are figuratively pulling up a chair next to God's big, huge mahogany desk with his little cheater glasses on as he looks over our spreadsheets and our finances, and we ask him, bro, help us with this. We need your help with money management, right? Because if you're anything like I am, you could use as much help as you can get. In fact, I'm curious, raise your hand if what you learned about money management in school has been beneficial to you as an adult. Okay, I expected some hands to go up, but literally I'm seeing no hands. Okay, so raise your hand if you wish that you would have learned some more practical money management advice in school that maybe could help you as an adult today. Okay, that's just about all of us. Very good. Thank you for your honesty. When I think back to what I learned as a kid in school, I think the only thing I can remember learning was how to properly fill out a check. Anybody remember those? All right? If you don't know what a check is, let me explain. Actually, no, I'm not going to waste anybody's time because they're irrelevant now. Anybody still using checks at the grocery store or anything like that? A couple of you are? Well done. All right. It's old school. Well, anyway, that's basically literally all I can remember learning in school about finances. So my hope is that this series, it won't be a complete, course on this, but it will at least get you a little bit more of the practical advice that you wish that you had, that I wish that I had growing up, so that ultimately you and I can win with money, so that we can really actually not have to be stressed and anxious all the time or fearful all the time when we think about money. And what we talked about last week was that winning with money really starts with having a healthy relationship with money. It really starts with putting money in its proper place and not thinking that it is something that it's not. Not putting it in a place that it's not supposed to be. It's actually using it for what its purpose is. And when you look at the advice that God gives, you'll discover that this is a big priority for him. This is a big deal for him. And he says it over and over and over again, how important it is that we have a healthy relationship with money. The things that he teaches and the things that he says all relate back to that. And I think the reason why is because God knows that a healthy relationship with money leads to more peace. It leads to more purpose, and it leads to more joy in our lives. That if we actually rightly relate to money and what it's supposed to be, that we will have more peace, we will have more joy, and we will have more purpose, whether you have a lot of money or you have no money at all. Because the amount of money that we have does not determine the relationship that we have with it, does not determine how we see it, how we view it, and the priority that we make it. Now, the opposite is also true, and this is also why I think God spends so much time talking about money. The opposite is true, that an unhealthy relationship with money will lead to less peace. It will lead to less purpose and less joy in life, regardless of whether you have a lot or you have a little. And again, I think God spends so much time talking about this because he wants you and he wants me to actually have a life that's fulfilled, that's satisfied, that's filled with peace, purpose, and joy. So as a result, Jesus spends more time talking about finances and money management than he does heaven and hell combined. Why would he do that? Because he cares about you and he cares about me. So as we talked about last week, in light of all this advice that God gives, the truth is, action takers are difference makers, right? Just say this out loud with me. Ready? Action takers are difference makers. Very good. One more time with gusto. Action takers. Yeah, you guys are great. Awesome. There's 5 things that I could really instill in the lives of the people who are that I have influence with. This would be one of them. Action takers. Action takers are the difference makers in life. It does not matter how revolutionary the advice you receive is. It doesn't even matter how divine the advice you receive is. If you don't do anything with the advice that you get, nothing will change. If you don't actually take action, your life won't get better. You won't be helped in any way. So my challenge for you throughout this series, I'm begging you, is to actually take God's advice, to actually take him seriously with the advice that he gives about our finances, because I know that if you do, your financial world will transform for the better. But action takers are difference makers. If you just listen to it, It won't help at all. So last week we talked about the first game-changing piece of money management advice that God gives us, which is simply to keep track of everything. And I know it sounds so simple, but this is extremely profound. That you and I, if we really want to win with money, we have to pay attention to it. We have to literally keep track of it. Pay attention to every expense, every transaction that we make, and write it down, categorize it, and determine I bought a drink at Starbucks. How much do Starbucks drinks cost these days? $25. I bought a Starbucks drink. Okay, you write that down, $25, and then you categorize it. And I just suggested to keep it simple, four main categories. You got bills. These are your fixed expenses, my mortgage, my rent, my water bill, my electric bill. Then you have eating. Could be eating out, could be groceries, could be snacks, whatever. Then you have shopping, just whatever you buy at Target, Amazon, whatever store of your choice is, Home Depot, and then just miscellaneous. Everything else goes there. So you go to Starbucks, you buy a drink, you say Starbucks, $25, eating. And then you write down every single transaction that you have, because when you do this, just the simple act of paying attention and tracking, it triggers Pearson's law. We talked about this last week. When performance is measured, performance improves. This is why scales exist. It's why stopwatches exist. It's why the grading systems at school exist, because the simple act of just paying attention to your performance will automatically help you increase your performance, which means even if you don't do anything else in your finances, if this is the only thing that you do, the only piece of God's advice that you take, your finances will get better. You don't have to make a budget, although that's not a bad idea. You don't have to, invest in crypto or do all this research on the stock market. Just keep track. Just start there. Just get a notebook, open the note app on your phone, get another kind of financial app, and start categorizing, and you will see your money world improve, guaranteed. This is tip number 1 from God. Keep track of everything. So if you missed last week, we talked about a whole bunch more, so I hope that you'll catch up. You can do that for free anytime on demand, localchurchli.com/watch. But for now, we're going to look at the second game-changing money tip that God gives us that's all over the Old and New Testament. And in my opinion, this is the best money advice that God gives, but it is the hardest for us to take. It's the best advice that he gives, but it is the hardest for us to take, and I'm including myself in this. But you are strong, competent Long Islanders. You can do anything, right? I mean, we're Long Islanders. So even though this is going to be really hard to take, I think you can take it. Do you think you can take it? All right, do you want to know? You weren't very confident in that. You know this trick. Wait, do you think you can take it? Yeah. Just remember you asked for it. All right, here it is. All right, yes. Here's the second, although I think the second piece of advice that we're going to look at, but the most important that God gives, you're not going to like it, but you can take it. It's this. Don't keep 100% of what you receive. Don't keep 100% of what you receive. That is, don't keep every single cent of a dollar that you receive. From the very beginning of time, from the very beginning of humanity, God has been guiding people to not keep 100% of what they receive. Instead, to give away a portion of everything that comes to them. Now, before we go any further, let me give you a disclaimer. Okay, I do this every time we talk about giving in church because just like you, I've heard horror stories and I tend to be skeptical and sometimes cynical. And so I understand if the idea of talking about money, especially talking about giving in church, makes you uncomfortable, makes you feel awkward, I know exactly what that feels like. I was put off by the church for many years because of money stuff in the church. So hear me out on this. You don't need my permission. I'm not the boss of you. If you're not a follower of Jesus, God's not the boss of you. But I'm going to say this anyway. If any part of you feels like I'm trying to manipulate you, I want you to hear me say this, then honestly, don't give here. Again, you don't need my permission for that, but I just want you to know, if any part of you feels like I'm being sleazy or sneaky, or I'm trying to pressure you or guilt you in any way, then look, just don't give here, okay? You should only give to places that you really trust and that you really love, hands down. So, again, I promise nobody's going to do anything weird. I'm not going to keep track and, follow up with you in a couple weeks and be like, are you giving yet? And I promise you that would never, ever happen, right? But I know there are churches who do that. We're not a church like that. At the end of the service today, we're not going to pass a gold plate. We're not going to pass a bucket. Nobody's going to put pictures of sad children or dogs on the screen and play sad music for you. Nobody's going to lock the doors until we raise everything that we want to raise today. None of that weird stuff's going to happen, I promise you. So you have no reason not to lean in. today, because it's not going to get weird. You have no reason to clutch your wallet. Nobody's going to ask you to take out your wallet. I promise you that. But full disclosure, I am going to do my best to make the case for why I think you should take God's advice on this seriously. I'm going to do my best to make the case. But again, honestly, if you think that I'm being weird or sneaky, but you like the advice, then you could go give to another church. And I'd be totally fine with that. I just don't want any reason for you not to actually hear me out on this, actually hear God out on this, okay? And finally, if you really don't like it, then let's just be honest. You don't do 90% of the things that we talk about around here anyway, right? So just don't do it. You don't have to get weird about it. I'm not naive to that, so just don't do it, all right? Because at the end of the day, when we talk, we don't talk about giving to get money. We never talk about giving to get money here. We talk about giving because God and Jesus talked about giving a lot, which is why even if the wealthiest people in the world, let's say Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and Bill Gates and Lex Luthor and Tony Stark, if they all flew into Long Island today and dropped $1 trillion on local church and set us up for life, we would still talk about giving regularly. We would still talk about it regularly. Why? Because God did. And I would be a bad pastor if I did not talk to you about what God says. So we're going to talk about what God says because it's really, really important. So again, if it makes you uncomfortable, I get it. But your frustration with this, the tension that you might be feeling, your hesitation you might be feeling about this, it's not with me. All right? Because again, there's no pressure on my end for this. That frustration is with God. All right, that you're going to have to take that up with God because we're just going to look at what God says together. And believe me, I know what that fight is like. I know what it's like to wrestle with that with God. And so that's what you're wrestling with, not me. Don't shoot the messenger, okay? Okay? Good. Let's talk about the most important piece of money advice that God gives, but the hardest for us to take, and that is do not keep 100% of what you receive. Never keep 100% of what you receive. And he says this over and over and over and over again. In fact, I don't normally do this. I usually like to stick to like one passage of scripture and like kind of dive deep into that. But today, I'm going to do like a little bit of a rapid fire through multiple places in the Old and New Testament that Jesus says this because I just want you to know I'm not making this up. All right? I want you to know that this is something that he does continually say all throughout scripture. And it starts with the very beginning. If you were to open up a Bible today and literally start with the first page, you would be reading what's called Genesis. It's the very first book of the Bible. And in Genesis, God guides people to give 1/10. He guides people to give a portion of what they receive and to not keep it all for themselves. In Genesis chapter 28, there's a man named Jacob who decides to set up this memorial to worship God. And here's what he does. This is Jacob's words in Genesis chapter 28. He says this, and this memorial pillar I have set up will become a place for worshiping God. How are you going to worship God, Jacob? Oh, I'll tell you. I will present to God 1/10 of everything he gives me. You mean you're not going to keep 100% of what you receive? Nope. 1/10 of it, which is known as a tithe, by the way. Have you ever heard that word tithe? It just means 1/10. So Jacob is deciding, I'm not going to keep 100% of what I receive. Instead, I'm going to give away 1/10. So even before this idea of tithing, giving 1% became a law, became a commandment, because if you're familiar with the 10 commandments, those are just the first 10. There's actually like 600 plus. And one of them is a commandment to Israel that you are to give 1/10 of everything that comes your way. But before it even became a law, God was guiding people like Jacob to give, to not keep 100% of what they received. But then it became a law. Moses went up to Mount Sinai. God gave him the law so that he could help him lead the nation of Israel. And in Leviticus, you can read what those laws are. And here's what it says in Leviticus chapter 27. 1/10 of the produce of the land, whether grain from the fields or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord and must be set apart to him as holy. Well, it sounds like he's talking about farmland and produce. Yeah, that's because that's what their wealth was. If it were today, God would say, hey, 1/10 of your paycheck, 1/10 of the cash that you get, it belongs to the Lord as holy. It's to be set apart for him. Don't keep 100% of what you receive. And then God goes on many times to talk about the benefits of this, because this is beneficial to people. And he affirms the benefits multiple times in Proverbs. We looked at a proverb last week, but we'll look at one this week too. Here's one of the benefits. He goes on to say this in Proverbs. Honor the Lord. It means listen to God. Do what he says. Honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. That is, don't keep 100% of what you receive. Then, you know what will happen? He will fill your barns with grain and your vats will overflow with good wine. There's a promise attached to this advice that God gives. God is essentially saying, if you trust me with 90% of your income, right? If you trust me and give away 10% of your income, I will take care of you. In fact, I will take such good care of you, you won't even know what to do with all that you have. And he even goes as far as to say, test me in this. He literally like taunts the nation of Israel. He taunts his followers to test him through the prophet Malachi, who was speaking on behalf of God. Malachi says this, or on behalf of God in chapter 3. He says, bring all the tithes, 1/10, bring all the tithes into the storehouse so there will be enough food in my temple. If you do, says the Lord of heaven's armies, you know what I'll do? I will open up the windows of heaven for you, not so that you can sneak into heaven the back way, but because I can't get it all out the front door. And there's so much blessing. I will pour out a blessing so great you won't have enough room to take it in. Literally, this is God saying, go ahead, make my day. I dare you. Try it, he goes on to say. Put me to the test. Put me to the test in this. Now, again, if you're anything like me, the first time that I like encountered this advice, I'm like, I don't think this is for me. This is tough. And it's why I like get so nervous even talking about it, because I know how it feels. I know how hard it is to hear this kind of thing. It's tough. In fact, I was talking to Emily earlier this week as I was writing all this, and I'm like, oh man, we have to talk about it. We're talking about tithing. We're talking about like the advice that God gives, and this is like the top advice he gives, and it gets me all stressed out because I'm afraid of. I project onto you what I feel about this or what I have felt about this, which is my fault, my problem. But then as we were talking and we were reflecting about how like this has been a part of our life though for 13 years. Ever since we've been married, for 13 years, we've been giving away 10% of our income every single year we've been married. And I asked her, I was like, can you ever remember a time in the last 13 years where we ever needed anything? We've certainly wanted things, but can you remember a time where we've ever needed anything? Where we've ever been like in trouble? And she's like, no. And I'm like, I can't either. Like God has literally, we've tested him in this and he has followed through. Like we have always had more than we need, even though we've given a lot of money. And so like we know firsthand, and so it's funny because when we're talking, it's like, why are you so nervous to talk about this? Like we have like the coolest story about this. I'm like, I know, but I know just what a hang up this can be for people if they've never done it, if they've never actually followed God and tested him in this and experienced it for themselves. Now, some of the reason why people don't give this a try, some of the reasons why people don't test God in this is because they'll make the argument that this is outdated, that the whole concept of tithing and giving is outdated because of Jesus. The argument goes this way, that Jesus showed up 2,000 years ago, and he claimed to be God in a body. But then he proved who he was, and he proved his claims by dying and coming back to life. And because of his death and resurrection, it led to the forgiveness of our sins. And it led to us being able to have a right relationship with God. We were restored with God because of Jesus and through Jesus. And because that happened, now there are parts of the law, which was the way we used to have to connect with God, but there are parts of that law now that are unnecessary because Jesus kind of paved the way for us to now connect with God without having to keep every single one of those 613 commandments. So the argument goes that, look, because of Jesus, like, we don't have to do those things. Just like we don't have to sacrifice animals anymore. Jesus was the sacrifice for us. Just like we don't have to keep the Sabbath day holy. Just like we don't have to adhere to these dietary restrictions, or like set apart all these days on our calendar as celebrations. Like all that stuff is unnecessary because of Jesus. And so they'll also clump tithing in with that. Well, we don't have to tithe either. And while that's partly true, it's not fully true. Here's why. Because there are times where Jesus literally says, like, yeah, you don't have to do this anymore. If you want to eat ham and bacon, you can eat ham and bacon. Like Jesus affirmed that was okay. There were times where Jesus is like, yeah, you don't have to set aside the Sabbath as holy. Like you don't have to just keep Saturday as the day that is just for God. But you know what he also does? He says, but you should still do this because it's put there to serve you. Like we don't keep the Sabbath holy for God. We keep the Sabbath holy because it's good for you. It's good for me to actually rest. But because of Jesus, it doesn't have to be so particular. It doesn't have to be so specific. It should just be a general like, hey, keep this in mind. Make sure you take time to rest. So there are certain parts of the law that are like, not necessary anymore. Animal sacrifice, we can do away with that. But keeping the Sabbath holy, yeah, you don't have to be particular about it, but there are parts of it that you should continue to do because they're good for you. And there's a moment where Jesus tells us that tithing is one of those things. You don't have to do it to connect with God. You don't have to do it to have a relationship with God, but you should do it because it's good for you, because it'll benefit you. Just like we should not murder each other because it's good for us, right? Jesus would say you should tithe because it's good for you. And I want to show you where he says that. So there's a moment where he's having kind of like a conversation with some of the religious leaders of the day who didn't really fully comprehend this. They didn't really understand this. They loved keeping the law, and they thought that that was the most important thing. And so here comes Jesus to show them, actually, you guys are thinking about this wrongly. And so Jesus says this, and Matthew, who was there, records it for us in his gospel in Matthew chapter 23. Jesus talking to the Pharisees and the religious leaders, he says, "What sorrow awaits you, teachers of religious law, and you Pharisees, you're hypocrites." It's meaning you say one thing, but you're doing another. For you are careful to tithe. You're careful to not keep 100% of what you have, to give away 1/10, even the tiniest income from your herb gardens. But you ignore the more important aspects of the law: justice, mercy, and faith. In other words, the way you're thinking, talking again to these religious leaders, the way you think is that giving, as long as you're giving, that's what makes you right with God. That's how they were thinking. But Jesus is like, that's not the right way to think about this. You've completely missed the point if that's how you're thinking, because God doesn't care about your money. And he would say the same thing to you and me. Like, I don't care about your money, and I don't need your money. He's God. He doesn't need any money from us, right? And the Pharisees needed to understand this too. The religious leaders needed to understand this too. He's not concerned with our money. Who cares about that? He's concerned with our heart. And he's concerned with what money can do to our heart if we don't have the healthy relationship with it, if it's put in the wrong place. So if you give, if you follow him in this, if you obey him in this, but you still have a wicked heart that mistreats other people, that disrespects other people, then what you give really means nothing. That's kind of what Jesus is saying, because you've neglected the more important things: faith, mercy, justice. It would be interesting if this is how it worked, though. For some of us, it would be great, wouldn't it? Imagine if you could just come to church every Sunday and grab a menu and see okay, what would it cost for me to flip somebody off this week? What would it cost for me to cyberbully somebody this week? Oh, $50 for cyberbullying, $20 for cursing someone. I'm going to give $130 today, and that should cancel out all the ways I'm going to mistreat people. Wouldn't that be great if you could just do that? Of course, that's not how God works, but this is kind of how the religious leaders were thinking. All right, I'll just give I'll just give enough money here to make up for all the things all the harm that I'm doing and all the harm that I'm causing other people. That as long as they give, they can mistreat people. That's kind of how they were thinking. So Jesus has to address this, because they're misunderstanding the fact that tithing has nothing to do with the money itself. It has everything to do with their heart. So he addresses this. And what he says next is amazing. But you need to pay attention, and I need to pay attention to the first 3 words that he says, because these words are often dismissed, or they're forgotten about, or they're just read over really quickly. But if you really want to know what Jesus thinks, here it is. If you want to know what he thinks about tithing and giving, here it is. You should tithe, is what he says. What does Jesus think about tithing? What does Jesus think about giving? He would say, you should do it. Do you have to adhere to all these dietary restrictions about pork and stuff? No, he didn't say that. Do you have to do animals? No, you don't have to do that. But you know what you should do? You should tithe. You should give. You should not keep 100% of what you have. Then he goes on to say, you should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. In other words, the reason why we give, the reason why we tithe is not for God's benefit. It's not to have a right relationship with God so that God's proud of us and God's happy with us. No, the reason we give is for our benefit. It's for our heart. It's for the benefit of other people. That's what Jesus means when he says, don't neglect the more important things, which begs the questions, well, what are they? What are the more important things? And the answer is really easy as you look at the life of Jesus, as you look at what he taught about, as you look at the way he behaved, the way he interacted with people. The more important things in life to God are you. You are the more important things. Those who are around you are the more important things to him. Your heart, your character, your relationships, that's what God cares about. I want you to think about it this way, okay? Think about this for a second. If you have kids in the room, or if you don't, just imagine like you have kids. When you tell them to eat their vegetables, do you care about the vegetables? At the end of the day, when you tell them to eat the vegetables, is it because of the vegetables? Probably not, right? You could care less about the vegetables themselves. The reason you tell your kids to eat their vegetables is because you care about them. You care about their health, and you care about how those vegetables are going to benefit them and make them strong and make them healthy, right? But if your children came up to you and proudly said, Mom, Dad, look, I ate all my vegetables, but at the same time, they were drinking poison while standing in a fire and getting ready to jump off of a tall building, right? And convincing everybody around them to do this too. If they were to do that, you'd be like, wait, hang on a second, okay? You've missed the whole point here. Like, you've completely missed, yes, you should eat your vegetables. And you should keep eating your vegetables. But let's not neglect the more important things, right? Your vegetables help you to live the best life that you could possibly live. They don't exist to cancel out all the ways that you're harming yourself or all the ways that you're harming other people. Does that make sense? Right? The vegetables, who cares about the vegetables? Who cares about the act of eating vegetables? What we care about is you. What we care about is your kids. What you care about is the people around us. And this is why, over and over and over again, God guides us. God guides us to not keep 100% of what we receive. Why? Because it's good for us. It's good for the people around us. It helps us grow. It helps us be strong. It helps us thrive spiritually and really financially. But if you're anything like I am, you need more than that. And I understand that. Like, it's one thing to be like, okay, that sounds fine, but why? Why is it good for us? How is it good for us? So let's just spend the rest of our time together. Let's just talk about that for a second. A mentor of mine, somebody that I'm regularly getting coaching from these days, is a guy named Bob Lodish. He wrote a book called Simple Money, Rich Life. Great book. You should get it if you want to kind of just dive deeper into the world of money management and the way God tells us to manage money. But he describes something that happened in this book. He describes something that happened in a town called Centralia, Pennsylvania in 1962. And I think this story is a great illustration for understanding why giving is helpful for us. So what happened back in 1962 in Centralia, Pennsylvania was a fire broke out in the town. And it was so bad that it actually spread to the coal mines underneath the town. And it got so bad that it became literally impossible to put out. In fact, I just pulled a snippet from history.com that describes this a little bit. Here's what, what's her name? Erin Blakemore wrote for history.com. She said this: as the years went on, the ground beneath the city itself became hotter and hotter, reaching over 900 degrees Fahrenheit in some locations. Smoke poured from sinkholes and gas-filled basements. Residents started to report health problems, and homes began to tilt. Even the dead cannot rest in peace, wrote Greg Walter for People in 1981. Graves in the town's 2 cemeteries are believed to have dropped into the abyss of fire that rages below them. Earlier that year, a 12-year-old boy fell into a sudden sinkhole created by the fire, barely escaping death. Crazy, right? Crazy. I mean, eventually, every resident was evacuated or it's called eminent domained, like kicked out of Centralia, Pennsylvania, except for 4. There's only 4 who remain. And now it's a ghost town. How many people want to go to Centralia, Pennsylvania now, right? See the ghost town. It's interesting. It would be fast. Maybe we'll take a field trip together. Anyway, the mine below the town has literally been on fire for the last 63 years. It's been burning for 63 years, and it's estimated to continue to burn for up to 200 more years. Wild, right? Now, why am I telling you this? Because money, like fire, is neutral. Money, like fire, is neutral. It itself is neither good nor bad. It itself is neither good nor bad. It can't be. It's neutral. It just depends on where it's located. It just depends on where it's located. I have a little illustration here. Let's see. If, I'll just put this here. It's like fire. Fire, if it's in a controlled place, let's say like a fireplace or a candle like this one. Fire. If fire is in a controlled place, it can be used for endless amounts of good, right? To bring warmth and light to everyone around it. But if it burns in a coal mine, it can cause endless amounts of destruction. Now here's the thing. According to Jesus, our hearts are like a coal mine. And if our heart becomes consumed with money, who we were made to be will be lost. Just going to say that one more time. If our heart becomes consumed with money, it becomes our whole focus, it becomes everything to us. Our relationship with it is like, it is the number one priority. If our heart becomes consumed with money, who we were made to be will be lost. And the people around us, or the people in the city above us, if you want to stick with that metaphor, they will suffer as a result. Now, the technical term for this, when the love of money consumes our heart, is called a word that nobody likes, greed. It's called greed. Here's my definition for greed. Greed is the assumption that anything that comes my way must be for my gain. That 100% of what I receive is 100% mine. Greedy people are like the seagulls in the movie Finding Nemo. Mine, mine, mine. Is that right? Yeah, mine, 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 mine. That's what greedy people are. Like, they see a flame. Ooh, flame. Ooh, mine, 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 mine. They get some money. Mine, mine. Paycheck, inheritance, tax return, bonus, lottery, whatever it is. It's mine, it's mine, it's mine. It's all mine. Now, don't get me wrong. Nobody ever wants to grow up and be a greedy person, right? Nobody ever makes that a plan to become greedy. Nobody wants to be greedy. And here's the thing. Nobody thinks that they're greedy. Right now, if I were to ask you, hey, write down the top 5 things that you struggle with. If you want to use a church word for it, write down your top 5 sins. I bet you nobody would include greed on there. Nobody ever thinks that they are greedy, because greed is like BO on a middle school boy. They can't smell it, but everyone else can, right? That's greed. Greed is impossible, almost impossible to recognize in the mirror, but you can spot it in somebody else like that, which means that most people who are greedy don't even know it. Most people who are greedy don't even know it. You and I could be dealing with the consequences and suffering from greed and not even know it. And honestly, I don't really think it's our fault. I don't think it's your fault. I don't think it's my fault, because many of us were never taught anything different. How many of you learned about greed and how to combat it in school? Okay, me neither. Most of us weren't taught about greed. Instead, we were modeled other things for us. In our homes, in culture, like in advertising, these are the messages that we received growing up. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers, right? Remember that? I found it, it's mine. It's mine now, 100% is mine. Or this one, you gotta look out for number 1, man. It's all about you. It's all about me. Or get yours. Get yours. Or how about this one? Treat yourself. Any Parks and Rec fans? Treat yourself, man. That's what life's all about, treating yourself. But here's the danger. Here's the danger. Let me come back to my candle. The more we pull the flame toward ourselves, the more it becomes all about us, the more likely it is to burn us, right? The more likely, mine, 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 mine. It's scary, right? Getting my face that, wow. The more likely it is to get into my heart and set fire to the coal mine of my heart. And this is why God keeps repeating the advice over, because he's like, you guys aren't getting this. I got to keep saying it. You should tithe. You should tithe. Don't keep 100% of what you receive, because tithing, or giving away a portion of what we have, is our way of pushing back the flame. It's our way of pushing this back into the safety zone, into a controlled environment where it does no harm, but instead it actually does good to everyone in its proximity. And let me tell you what happens to a person who really does take this advice seriously, who really does test God in this and chooses not to keep 100% of what they receive. I'm telling you this from experience, but I'm telling you this from not just my personal experience, but what I've witnessed in the lives of many people who were brave enough to try it. People who take this seriously, they really do have more peace, joy, and purpose. They really do. You want to know why? Because they stop putting their hope for peace, and they stop putting their hope for joy, and they stop putting their hope for purpose in something that it was never meant to be in. They stop putting it in their money. The number one contender for your hope and trust and all that stuff, it's not the devil, right? You don't wake up in the morning like, should I serve the devil today, or should I serve God? He's probably not. If you do, that's weird. I don't want to meet you. The number one contender for your trust, for your hope, is money. It's your stuff, right? And so when people misunderstand money and they put they stake everything in that one thing, it can't deliver. But people who take God seriously with this, who give, who put this where it belongs, they experience more peace. Why? Because they find it in something that actually can deliver, in God, right? In all the good things that God gives us. They find their joy and their purpose in God. Guess what never runs out? Guess what never gets old? Guess what can never be taken from you? Guess what never loses its value? God. And I know that sounds probably crazy if you're not a follower of Jesus, or if you don't do the God thing, you're not sure what you even think about that. I understand that, and I don't think I could even help you understand unless you just do it. But those of us who've had a relationship with God, you know what I'm talking about. You know what, like the Apostle Paul talks about when he says, it's like I have this peace that surpasses understanding. I could be in prison with nothing, and yet I have joy. How? Because I put my joy not in my stuff, not in my money, not in something that could cause harm, but I put it in God. They have more peace, joy, and purpose, people who do this and take this seriously. And another thing that they have is they have bigger faith, much bigger faith, because they get to see God do way more with 90% than they could ever do with 100%. Because they get, like Emily and I, they get to see God continuously provide for their needs, even when they're giving 1/10 away. They have bigger faith. You know what else they have? They are way more likely to have a plan, and I really should say an intentional plan that benefits them, because people who tithe have to pay attention. If you want to actually tithe, you have to look and see, okay, what do I got? How much do I have? And what's 10% of that so I can give it away? They have to pay attention. And we already talked about last week, we already talked about the benefits of paying attention. Pearson's Law will kick in. When performance is measured, performance improves. You know what else they have? They have the joy of helping people, and that feels good. When you're able to share this flame with others, hey, this isn't just for me. This is for all of us. Everybody gets to benefit from this. God uses what we give and ensures that the needs of other people are met. Imagine if everybody truly did this. Imagine if this whole world never kept 100% of what they received. There would be no hunger anymore. You know what would prevail? Justice, mercy, faith. If every single person did this. This is how God set it up. It would be an incredible world to live in. You know what else they have? They protect themselves from greed. They protect themselves from this fire contaminating their heart. They keep it in its proper place. So, what does that look like? What does this look like practically? How do we actually do this? And I don't want to sound condescending, and I don't want to demean anybody in this, but I've literally had this question so many times that I feel like I got to share, all right? Because some people are like, I don't even know how to calculate 10%. And if you're a math person, you're like, really? But if you're not a math person like me, you're like, yeah, how do you even calculate that? How do you even figure this out? So let me tell you what this looks like practically. First of all, I'm not going to tell you have to do 10%. This is God's suggested starting point, but I know it's expensive and it's hard to live on Long Island. I think you should just pick a percentage and pick a percentage that works for you. It might be, maybe it's not 10, maybe it's 3%, maybe it's 2%, maybe it's 0.5%. I don't really care, but it starts with just picking a percentage and then doing it, and then giving it. Every time something comes your way, instead of keeping it all for yourself, you decide, I'm not going to keep 100% of this. A certain percentage of it is going to get given away. So let's just say you do choose 10%, and you want to figure out what that looks like. So we'll use a hypothetical situation. Imagine that Emily and I, we get paid $100 a month. That's our salary, and we're going to use easy numbers, okay? So we get paid $100 a month. God could not have made this more simple. I think God knew that most of us would suck at math, and so he's like, hey, just give 10%, because you know what that means? All you have to do is, you see this decimal point right here? If you want to give 10%, all you have to do is just take that decimal and move it over one to the left. Boom. You want to know what 10% of 100 is? $10. That's it. Easy, right? Now, since our pay is consistent and we get paid the same thing every single month, we only had to do this math once. We figured out what 10% was, and then we just chose to automate our giving, because people automate what they love, right? I love my dog so much. I automate his dog food. I want to make sure he's fed. So it just automatically comes every 6 weeks. It's great. I love watching Netflix. I automate that payment. It just comes out. I don't even know. I love God, and I love obeying God, and I love advancing the kingdom of God on Long Island as much as I can, so I automate my giving. This is what Emily and I do, right? And it's amazing to see the difference it makes. But again, let's say you choose a different percentage. You're like, 10 is a little bit more for me. I think you just need to choose a percentage that stretches you. You can't give, if you're only giving like an amount that you don't feel, right? And it doesn't actually affect you, this is still too close. And this is what happened with the Pharisees. 10% wasn't enough for them. because they weren't actually seeing justice, mercy, faith lived out in their lives. So this was so close, it was still contaminating their heart. So it might not be 10, but it might be 2, it might be 3. Whatever you feel stretches you, that's the point that you got to give. So let's say you choose 5%. I'm going to give you the simple math formula. This is way more math than you thought you were going to do at church today, right? All right, so let's say you make $100 a month. You want to give 5%. You multiply it by 0.05, and that tells you exactly how much 5% of $100 is. It's $5. All right, let's say you pick another number. You want to give 15%, and you make $1,200 a month. You take your salary, you times it by 0.15, and that will tell you how much. $180 is 15% of $1,200. This is way too much math for me, guys. I feel like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? But does it make sense? Okay, you don't have to do this, but I'm just telling you how in case you want to do this. So, lastly, if you are not a follower of Jesus, this all probably sounds so stupid and so absurd to you, and I absolutely get it, but I think you should do it anyway. Do it anyway. And here's why. Here's why. It's not to obey God. It's not any of that. You know, if you don't believe in God, it doesn't matter. I think that you should do this because you are just as susceptible to greed as I am, right? All of us are susceptible to this whole greed thing. And unless you know any other way to keep it out of your heart, to keep it from contaminating you, then I think you should follow Jesus in this. You don't have to believe everything there is to believe about Jesus to follow him and to take his advice. So I think you should give for your own sake, for your own good. But here's the thing. And by the way, you don't have to give to a church. If you didn't like the church, that's okay. Go give to another nonprofit that really speaks to your heart. Give to something, though. But if you are a follower of Jesus, it's going to sound harsh, but it's just true. This is what it looks like to follow Jesus. If you aren't doing this, then you're not really a follower. You might just be a believer, but you're not actually taking steps in his direction because he tells you, you should tithe. And he tells me, you should tithe. And if this makes you uncomfortable, if it feels impossible, I understand that. If you want to resist and you find yourself like, I'm not doing that. I can't do that. I don't think I can do that. If you call me your pastor, I got to ask you this question. Why? Why are you resisting? Why is this so tough for you? I want you to ask yourself that question. I already told you that this isn't about you giving here. So you're not resisting me. I don't want to be any part of that for you. At the end of the day, you are resisting God if you don't want to do this, because this is what God tells us that it looks like to follow Jesus. I know it's harsh, but it's true. So you have to ask yourself the question, why? Why would I do this? And I guarantee you it's going to be one of 2 answers. Fear or doubt. Fear or doubt. You're afraid that God won't take care of you, or you doubt that he will. And again, that is super understandable. That makes sense. But here's the thing. If you're wrestling with that, if you're fearful, if it feels impossible, and I don't think I can do this, that is actually an amazing place to be. Like faith-wise, spirit-wise, that's an amazing place to be, because faith becomes real at the intersection of fear and doubt. When you are faced with true fear and you got to step into the unknown and it's scary, that's when your faith becomes real. That's when trusting God stops being a theory and it becomes a lived experience. It's easy to trust God with our last breath and beyond, right? We have no control over that. I don't know what's going to happen, so I guess I trust you, God. The reason why Jesus steps into our lives and says, don't keep 100% of what you receive, you should tithe, is because he wants us to trust him with every other breath leading to our last breath. And how does he do that? He messes with the number one thing that has our trust. Our stuff, our money, our bank account. So he's like, no, don't keep all of that. Give some of that away. You know why? Because that's going to be good for your heart. That's how you trust me. That's faith in action. So if you're worried, if you've got fear, if you've got doubt there, that's good. That's good. That could be God stretching you beyond that and keeping you from being held back by these things. You just got to take that step and trust him. It doesn't have to be 10%. Just try. Start with a little. 1%, 2%. Automate it. Make sure you keep track and trust him. Because really, the only question left to ask at this point is, are you just going to keep playing it safe and trusting your stuff and trusting yourself? Or do you want to take Jesus seriously? Do you want to follow Jesus seriously and trust the one who gave his all for you? The choice really is yours. Let me say a prayer with you. Well, Heavenly Father, I can't thank you enough that you did give us everything. God, that you gave us your life. That this is not a theory that you taught us, but it is something that you modeled for us. that generosity is who you are, that giving is who you are. And God, that you tell us to obey you in this, not because you need anything from us, but because you truly do care about us. You truly do care about our heart. And so God, would you help us to truly, clearly see that today? God, would you help remove any obstacle, maybe even any weird, awkward experiences we had in our past that cloud the way we see you and cloud the way we see this whole topic. Would you remove all that and help us see your love in it? Help us see your care in it. And then give us the wisdom to know what our next step is. And then would you give us the courage to do it? Give us the courage to take it, to truly trust you. And as we do, I pray, God, that your promise would be fulfilled. God, that you would pour out a blessing so vast that we wouldn't even know what to do with it all. And I pray that through our obedience, through our willingness to follow you, other people would be helped. They would be seen and loved and cared for. And God, you would be honored. And we pray this in the name of Jesus, who gave his all. Amen.
Well, hey, I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us. And before you go, I would love for you to consider engaging with local church in 3 additional ways. The first is to fill out a Connect card. No matter where you are in the world, we would love for you to do this. It'll only take you about 30 seconds, and it's just an easy way for us to get to know you a bit more and to serve you better, and for you to get to know us a little better as well. Just click the link in the description to get started. The second way that you can engage with local church is by visiting us in person. If you're local and you don't regularly participate in a church community, we would love to invite you to join us every Sunday. Resources like this can do a lot for our faith personally, but Jesus teaches that God does something unique for our faith when we choose to gather corporately. Click the link in the description to plan your visit. And finally, if you've been positively impacted by local church in any way, would you consider making a tax-deductible donation? Content like this, along with everything that goes on around here, is only made possible by the generosity of people just like you. You can click the link in the description or visit localchurchli.com/give. So, once again, thank you so much. We hope that you found this content helpful and inspiring, and we're so honored to be a part of your faith journey.